Hi, my name is Senga Lindsay. I'm a landscape architect from British Columbia, and we're here down under New Zealand, and today we're going to look at an English garden design. This particular one was inspired by the arts and crafts movement of the 1880s-1910. This followed on the heels of the Victorian period, where gardens were just merely eclectic collections of plants. Here, in this garden, plants started being grouped and they were created more as palettes. They were also created as specimens, but they were more ordered and coherent. And let's take a look at some of the principles of how these gardens were done. Often you had entry features or you had arbor pergola features. It could either be marking entranceways, or there could have been a table sitting or benches in here for just meditation or contemplation. In this case, it's an entry sequence, and as you can see, even though you've got a riot of plant material on both sides of the walkway, you do have a very strong axis, and that axis again goes to a center focal point, which is the water fountain at the end. So even though you have an eclectic mix of plants, some of the basic principles that make this garden somewhat soothing and a place of respite are things like the color palette. And I'm going to take you on, show you how that works. This is a predominantly blue or cool color palette. You've got little bits of spots of red for accent, but if you take a look around, predominantly have the blue catmint, you have the blue delphiniums, also in the background, white foxgloves, a very cool, restful color palette. Now you can create a myriad of palettes. You could have a hot one with reds and oranges that are woven throughout the garden. But as you notice, the delphiniums, for example, have been repeated throughout the garden, and that's the trick to creating a less eclectic garden. Is you start grouping plants in twos and threes of the same thing, and you repeat them through the whole garden. Plus, you use a color palette that's harmonious with each other, like pinks and blues and whites would be a great romantic, restful, sort of contemplative color palette to use. But at all times, as you can see, it's a very, very formal situation with this walkway. This walkway often were made with fired brick or gravel, something a bit earthy and garden-esque, very fitting to the English garden. There was always a focal point at the end of the axis, and the axis actually goes this way to the east and the west, punctuates with a sitting bench behind me, and in this case we do have a walled garden. Walled gardens weren't always that common, but in this case we're creating an outdoor room here. And in this case also, this garden leads into our next walled garden, which we're going to go look at right now. You can see, going through the garden gate, we have a very strong, again, focal point, this time a little bit different. We've got a pond that sits in a big square lawn area. So let's go look inside and see what the rest of the space looks like. So a little different from the walkway and fountain feature. Now we've got a large square lawn that grounds the space, and we've still got our perennial border creating the rides of color. We've still got a color palette that's very cool in its selection. We've got the whites, some pinks, and blues again. And that sort of provides unity from one garden room to the next. The materials that have been used on the ground plane, for example, right below me, the same brick has been repeated, not only here, but if you remember the gateway that we just came through. And we also have a repeat of the materials over on that building. So, creating a bit of chaos with a bit of order is what creates an English garden. And then as little punctuations here, we have our formal clipped topiaries. Now another technique that could be used, that wasn't used in this garden, you could have had a clipped English boxwood hedge that had edged and held the edges of this perennial border to also create that unity and formality. One more room to go in our English border, and this is a very interesting, very niche-like garden. So coming through the same gateways. Again, this is the example that I was just talking about, the use of the hedging to create a formal edged border with a riot of plants inside. This is an interesting derivative of an English border, which was very popular, and it was called the White Garden. And you can start to see examples of the White Garden, and in fact, everything tries to relate back to white, from the flowers here to, if you look back in the background here, the white doves and the dove house. So everything in this garden was used, whether it was white colored foliage or white flowers, and the only thing that diverged from those colors was just the green. So this is the White Garden, and as you can see, the bench here is white as well. Again, same principles apply. We have the formality, the 4 axes. Not always has to be the case, but again, the 4 counterpoints. And here, the bench has now become the focal point for this garden. Hi, my name is Senga Lindsay, and I'm a landscape architect. And if you'd like to know any more about English garden design or the different styles that you can work with out there, please visit my website at www.sengadesigns.com.